a fun one today as I'll be sharing something that I've recently learned in the kitchen, which is upgrading my curry game. All because of a recipe in this cookbook, Burma Superstar, which is a collection of recipes from one of Ashley and I's favorite restaurants in the Bay Area. And one of Ashley's followers gifted us this book and specifically recommended the coconut chicken curry. So last week I made it and oh my God, she couldn't have been more right. What an amazing curry recipe, and that's what we're making today. We'll be making the coconut chicken curry and an easy no-fuss flatbread to go alongside the curry. Now before we start prepping, I do want to call out one ingredient, which is this Madras curry powder that I had to order on Amazon. And when I made the dish last week, I used the curry powder that I had in the pantry, which is the same curry powder you can find at any grocery store, and it came out great. I highly recommend using that curry powder if that's what you have at home. But I ordered the Madras curry powder on Amazon because this is the specific one that's called out in the Burma Superstar recipe. So we're gonna find out together if this actually makes a difference here. Now with all that out of the way, let's get cooking. To start our prep, I'm going to dice 2 medium onions and finely chop a whole bulb of garlic and then set aside. Then I'll cut up 3 pounds of boneless, skinless chicken thighs into bite-sized pieces, not too small because they will break apart a little after the long simmer process. I'll then add the chicken to my wide mixing bowl where I'll start to incorporate the dry spice marinade, which consists of paprika, turmeric, and salt. It's about a 3-to-1 ratio of paprika to turmeric and salt. I'll then set aside the chicken to marinate at room temp while I saute the onions and garlic. All right, so now that we have our onions and we have our garlic prepped here, we have our chicken marinating over there. This is game time now. This is gonna be the most crucial part of the cooking process because we're gonna be sauteing the onions and the garlic and creating a base layer for this curry. And we want to do this low and slow so we don't burn the garlic, we don't burn the onions, both very important because if either of those things happen, you basically have to start over. So I got my Dutch oven here at medium low and don't plan on moving from this spot right here for the next 15 minutes. I'm gonna keep my eyes on these onions. So oil going in, I got a few tablespoons of oil here and then get the onions in here. Move the onions around, make sure they're all evenly coated with oil. The goal here in this first stage is to release all the moisture from the onions. That's what's gonna get them nice and soft and translucent. This is what we're looking like a few minutes in. We got a lot of the moisture starting to cook off. So far, we're looking really good. And then I'm gonna salt these immediately. And the salt's gonna help release the moisture and season our onions. It's really important to pay attention to the sound here. Sound is so important to cooking. So even though a lot of times I'm cooking listen to a podcast or an audiobook, when things like this are happening in cooking, I have to put the podcast aside, key in on what's happening because this is gonna make or break the dish. Hopefully you can hear this, but as I move around the onions now, that's the sound we're looking for. That means water has evaporated from the onions. We want to keep the temperature low, like I said, and it's time to put in the garlic. And then let's put in our garlic. And I lowered the heat because I want to double make sure I do not burn this garlic because the only thing worse than burnt onions is burnt garlic. So we'll be sauteing this for another 5 minutes. And our sign here to move on is when the oil will start kind of rising from the bottom because we have such an even, soft layer of onion and garlic now. The oil will start to rise from the bottom onto the top. That's our sign to move on to the next step, which is putting in our chicken. It's so simple when you think about it. You're really just putting care into each step of the process, and that's why you get an upgraded curry dish. This is the Thai-style yellow curry sauce from Trader Joe's, and it's basically what I would do to make a dish like this before making it from scratch. A bottle like this is kind of the easy button, right? You pour this over the chicken with some water and some fish sauce, and then you got a meal. But if you really want to get that upgraded, higher level of curry, this is the way to go. You gotta season your chicken, let it marinate in those spices. And because the chicken's been marinating in those spices, once it hits the pan, those spices are just gonna release in all that heat and all of the onions and the garlic. And all those things are gonna start harmonizing with each other. 1 can of unsweetened coconut milk now going in. We're gonna bring this up to a boil and boil it off for a couple minutes just so we can get the coconut milk to thicken a bit. Now that the coconut milk has boiled off a little bit for a couple minutes, I'm gonna lower the heat down back to low, medium low, and then add a couple tablespoons of fish sauce here. And then finally, I'll be adding about a cup and a half of water just to cover the chicken. All right, so now that we have a gentle simmer here, we'll leave this uncovered for the next 50 minutes to an hour to simmer here. So while we're doing that, we can go ahead and make the dough for the flatbread. So while our curry simmers, let's make a quick and easy flatbread dough. I'm using my stand mixer here with the trusty dough hook. To the mixing bowl, I'm adding 3 cups of all-purpose flour, 3 tablespoons of ghee, then 1 cup of water and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. I'll start mixing on low and stop as soon as the dough starts forming. If the mixture looks too dry, add more water. We should end up with a slightly tacky dough that can easily be removed from the bowl. After which, I'll be kneading this dough for about 5 minutes by hand until it becomes more smooth and bouncy. Next, I'll be portioning out this dough into 4 pieces, forming each piece into their own dough ball. Each ball will be 1 serving, making 4 pieces of flatbread. So this whole dough mix will yield 16 pieces total of flatbread. Each dough ball is going to get wrapped up in saran wrap and refrigerated until I'm ready to serve with the curry. All right, this has been simmering for a nice hour here. The whole mixture looks incredible. The onions have really cooked down and it smells amazing in here. So our final 2 touches here before taking off the heat is adding our Madras curry powder. So we're gonna add a teaspoon of this, and then we'll also be adding a half teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Obviously, if you want it spicier, go ahead and add a full teaspoon. And now we'll simmer this briefly after adding those 2 ingredients. But now it's really about taking it off the heat. You'll wanna put the lid on with the heat off and let it sit for about 20 minutes before serving. The recipe book says that will allow more chicken juices to release into the sauce after it rests. The book also says this tastes so much better the next day, and that's how I roll. So I'll be taking the recommendation. I'm putting this in the fridge. We'll be reheating this curry and then making our flatbread for final serving. I'll now portion this dough ball into 4 smaller pieces and have a kitchen towel ready to cover them as we go. This is to make sure they don't dry out. And with each small dough ball, I'm dabbing the top with flour to make sure they don't stick and rolling them out into a circle with my rolling pin. Doesn't have to be too thin as we're not griddling these yet, just enough to get a flat surface where I'll be spreading on more ghee. This is where we'll be creating the flaky layers. I'm creating a cut at the bottom, then rolling the dough in clockwise, basically creating what looks like a Pillsbury croissant from the tube. And then I'm standing it upright and pushing it down at the center to form now what looks like a mini cinnamon roll. After I do that to all 4 small dough pieces, I'll let them rest under the towel while the curry heats up and the rice cooks. This will take about 20 to 30 minutes. And now that our curry is reheated and ready to serve, let's finish our final stage of the flatbread by adding some ghee to a non-stick pan at medium-high heat. Then once again dabbing the top of each dough ball with flour and rolling it into our final shape with the rolling pin. This is where you want to go as thin as possible. I'm not really concerned at all about the shape. We're going to tear these apart and devour them anyway. My top priority is a thin piece of dough because they will shrink as soon as they hit the hot pan. Cook each side for about a minute, keeping an eye on the heat to make sure you're not burning the bread. Once cooked through, I'm placing each piece of hot flatbread into a bowl with a kitchen towel, immediately covering them to keep warm for serving. All right, so we got our bowl of curry here on top of some rice. Let me do a little more lime as a little final touch. Lime and cilantro are crucial here. Oh my God. I'm actually kind of speechless right now. This is even better than the first time I made it. I do think there's a subtle difference to the Madras curry powder. The curry powder I used before is just as good, but there's a little more heat. I think the reason why this succeeds so much more than your normal bottled curry or box curry is because there's so many layers of flavor here. I'm getting a lot of chicken fat flavor from it sitting overnight, the juices resting with the curry. I'm getting all the spice from the paprika and the turmeric and the curry powder. Oh my God. The chicken is so good. Let's get a bite of some of this nice flaky bread. Look at that flaky goodness there. Really good. Perfectly seasoned with the salt and the ghee. You're really getting all that ghee flavor. See how it just breaks apart like that? all that flaky goodness. Goes really well with this curry. Nice to dip in the curry sauce and soak up all those juices and all that fats. Oh wow. This is such a good meal. And I think above all, nothing overpowers that base layer that we created with the onions and the garlic. I think a lot of boxed mixes or bottled curry sauces tend to overpower the aromatics that you might establish in the pot before putting in the chicken and the sauce. This doesn't do that because it just works in harmony with that onion, with that garlic that we so patiently created at the beginning of the cooking process. And what you get here is such a great reward, such a simple yet complex curry. I can't help but think this will be a gateway for me to explore more curry recipes. And I also feel like what Burma Superstar did with this simple recipe is create a nice base to create really any kind of curry. I'm sure vegetables like bell peppers and potato and carrots would also be fantastic in this. So I really hope you can upgrade your curry game like I did here. If you make this recipe, make sure to tag me on Instagram @MattyTries. Thank you so much for watching. I gotta finish the rest of this curry. We'll see you on the next one.